All right, welcome to the situation update for Tuesday, January 11th. 2022. This is Mike Adams here. Thank you for joining me. Here's just some of the highlights of what we have to cover today. The Evergrande company in China has now abandoned its corporate headquarters in Shenzhen. And apparently, this is from Nikkei.com, the Asian Nikkei, embattled developer to save costs by leaving high-profile location. That's the excuse? They're not fleeing? No, they're saving costs by abandoning their headquarters. Folks, this is the end of Evergrande in case, well, I know that you've already figured that out. The world is trying to pretend, the investor class is trying to pretend that Evergrande can still somehow turn this ship around. No, they're not going to turn anything around. Evergrande is imploding. It's just a slow motion train wreck that we're watching. But, when a big company like that abandons their headquarters, packed up all the paperwork, probably because they don't want Chinese authorities to be able to find it. And you can imagine the shredders are working harder than a Hillary Clinton intern at this point. And, they're just going to burn down all the documentation and lose it during the move or whatever is necessary to cover their tracks. So Evergrande is imploding. And with it, as we've mentioned before, we believe that some stablecoin companies are in dire trouble because of their Evergrande paper. So this has implications for the crypto market as well. And by the way, speaking of crypto, do you realize that Bitcoin in the last, 3 months or so, a little bit over, has lost about 40% of its value? I know a lot of people aren't tracking it that way, but if you had bought it at 67, 68,000, 69,000, I know it peaked somewhere close to that. If you had bought it there and now it's worth 40,000, you've lost about 40% of your money. And frankly, the minute you bought it, you lost it because you turned money into something that's not money, just like an online game of sorts. And until you sell it, it's not real. So there is, I believe, I think John Perez is right about this. I think there's a crypto reset coming. And a lot of people are getting out now, and they're very happy that they are, because they're cashing in and actually earning, the gains that they've had. And believe me, when this is all said and done, it's going to be a very tiny percentage of people who can say they got out above 40,000. Very small percentage. Okay, now in the pharma-controlled media category today, the entire mainstream media has now decided that they're going to tell the public that mass formation psychosis does not exist. And in doing so, they're demonstrating mass formation psychosis. So they're brainwashing the public into thinking that there's no brainwashing of the public taking place. And of course, mass formation psychosis, this concept was made popular by Robert Malone, Dr. Malone, in the Joe Rogan podcast recently. That's the first time most people heard about this concept, although we covered it in early December on naturalnews.com. But now the media has decided no such thing as mass formation psychosis. But they do say there was a Russia collusion conspiracy, and they say that all white people are racists. It's amazing. Of course, the media has zero credibility, as you know. But the media coordinating all the stories on this it's kind of like if you turn on the TV and CNN came on, and CNN's first broadcast was, "This is CNN. We are not attempting to brainwash you." You would say, what? Why would they say that? So why is the media going out of its way to declare there's no such thing as mass formation psychosis when that's exactly what it is? Kind of reminds me, in Texas, there are road signs that say, state law, obey all road signs. There are literally road signs like this. They're all over Texas. You drive around and you see these signs. And it always strikes me, I crack up laughing every time I see these signs, because I'm like, well, number one, if somebody is the kind of person who doesn't obey road signs, why would they obey that one? Because that sign says you should obey the other signs. So it's a sign that says obey all signs. Right? I mean, you see how funny this is, right? Or if you're a person who doesn't read road signs, would you read the road sign that says obey the other signs? Probably not, if you're the kind of person that doesn't read road signs. So it's kind of like they decided to try to get people to read road signs by putting that message in a road sign, which is what people are ignoring if they're ignoring road signs. I mean, come on. It's you can't make this up. I would just imagine that somewhere in, I don't know, Travis County, which is the Austin area of Texas where libtards rule, I would imagine that if you get pulled over for speeding, they would write you 2 tickets. 1 ticket for violating the speeding sign, and then a second ticket for violating the sign that says to obey the speeding sign. And you're like, what? Why are you giving me 2 tickets? Well, it's a state law that you should obey all the road signs, including the road signs that say to obey the other road signs. And yes, you're living in idiocracy. But I will tell you, by the way, to Texas's credit, because I love Texas. Texas has figured out the underpass situation rather eloquently. When you have a highway that crosses over a road, well, there are U-turns underneath the overpass on both directions. I don't know, I can't really describe it, but it's the most eloquent situation ever. Texas has the best designs for highways and roadways and on-ramps and off-ramps of any state I've ever visited in the country. So to Texas's credit, the state knows how to build roads that make sense, unless you go to Travis County, in which case, liberals were in charge and they just said, let's have all traffic collide at this point. And we'll just call it, and we'll just say it's a free-for-all or a roundabout or whatever, or a crash 'em up derby. And then somebody else said, no, let's just call that Interstate 35. So they did. Oh, that reminds me, by the way, speaking of interstates, remember the deal the other day in Virginia, Interstate 95, and everybody was snowed in, and it turns out a lot of people sat in their cars for 30 hours. 30 hours in a snowstorm, and they were running out of gas. And I forgot to mention, but somebody else brought this up. What do you do if you're in an electric car and you're stuck in a 30-hour snowstorm and you're just watching your batteries go down, 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 and you can't really generate heat by starting the engine because, there's not a combustion engine in there. You're just running out of batteries, and if you don't get to a charging station soon, you're screwed, right? Because once it runs out of batteries, it's like a very expensive brick on the road. You're going to have to get towed. So one more reason not to get an electric vehicle is because no one can bring you more batteries. If you run out of gas, you can call a friend. Hey, bring me a gallon of gasoline so I can get out of here. But not if you're in an electric car. There was something else interesting that came out of that situation in I-95. There was a bread company that had a bread truck there. I don't know, this was a feel-good story that came out of it. And a couple in a car noticed after they were getting hungry after a few hours, they're like, hey, there's a bread truck there. And so they still had batteries on their cell phone. And they called the bread company because it was during working hours, part of this, I suppose. And they got a hold of the company. They're like, hey, we're all starving out here on the highway. Can we have some of your bread? And the bread company called their driver and said, yeah, guess what? Distribute the bread. They had a truck full of loaves of bread. And so they handed out the bread to a bunch of people, and everybody had some bread. And as a prepper, first of all, I'm wondering, why don't people have some food in their own vehicles? But okay, nobody's a prepper. So next step. The second question is, why do they need the company's permission for this? Isn't this one of those force majeure situations, an act of God, where the driver of the bread truck himself should have been able to make the decision and say, hey, we're all starving here in a winter storm, and I have a truck full of bread. I bet you if I hand out this bread, we're going to help a lot of people, create a lot of goodwill, have some good publicity. The company's going to get a wonderful story out of this. We're going to be saving people with the bread. Why did it take the company's permission to do this? You know what I'm saying? If it was my company, if I had a bread company and the driver had a truck full of bread on the highway and everybody was starving to death, and I found out later that the driver just started handing out bread to everybody, I would be thrilled. It's like, well, that's awesome. You made the right call. I mean, who's going to say, oh, no, 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 don't give the bread to starving, hungry people who are freezing and might die because it might cut into our company profits? No. Who's going to say that? It just strikes me that people aren't prepared to make decisions in emergencies. If there's a bunch of people hungry all around you and you have a whole lot of extra food in the back of your truck, hand it out. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. Again, I think about community level preparedness, right? I stock up on things at an insane level because I plan to hand things out. I plan to donate to multiple local churches in a crisis. And I've donated truckloads of food in the past to food banks and, well, in multiple states, come to think of it. But maybe that's just me. I just I just don't know why people have to process that. It seems like it should be the default. People are hungry, help them out. Okay, now shifting topics just slightly, but another funny news item here. This is from climatedepot.com. They've found that there's a category of products now. They're called reusable toilet paper. This is a whole new thing. This is some new level of climate insanity. And according to the climate alarmists, they say that toilet paper is really, really bad for the planet because they say it's using trees that are sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. Therefore, you have to stop throwing away toilet paper. You have to save it all and reuse it. So they have this reusable toilet paper that comes with instructions that, you wipe, and then they say you should throw it in the laundry and just like wash it with all your shirts and everything. and then you have to rewind it back onto the toilet paper roll yourself. And I'm just thinking, why go through all that trouble when you can just have a toilet with like a bicycle pedal in front of you, and then you can just have like that toilet paper run from the back of the toilet, like underneath your butt cheeks, onto a bicycle roller, and you can just exercise and wipe, and then when you're done, you just pedal backwards, and that's the reusing cycle. And liberals would love this, and I think this should be patented. This is like the eco-friendly green wiping recycling device invention, something like that. And I bet you could sell these things to liberals, especially if you had a screen on it that was kind of like what's that company, Peloton or Peloton, whatever they're called, that have the bicycles, the exercise machines. And you can imagine that you're pedaling down a beautiful canyon and you're racing and it's counting the calories and everything. You're connected to the cloud. What if you could just recycle your toilet paper while connected to the cloud, while wearing like Mark Zuckerberg metaverse virtual reality goggles? You could just poop and exercise and wipe. And then, as we saw, about a month ago, McDonald's could have this whole thing in their restaurant. So, they already have this at McDonald's where you can eat your cheeseburger and your Big Macs and you can pedal away. And all they're missing is really the recycled toilet paper aspect. And then it would be totally green at many, many levels. And this is when you realize that living an eco-friendly life, the way leftists really envision it, is basically like being a filthy homeless person who owns nothing, lives in a cardboard box, showers once a year, and reeks. And I'm not saying that to put down homeless people at all. A lot of people are in that situation due to no fault of their own. It's just that liberals want the rest of us to live like that. And that's why they keep rolling out these insane things. So I just wanted to give a little science update to all of the eco-greeny toilet paper recycling people. Maybe somebody should tell you, if you're growing trees and cutting them down for the paper pulp, the cellulose basically, and then you're regrowing the trees in the same area, it's all a closed loop of carbon. Okay, so the trees take carbon out of the atmosphere, some of that carbon goes into the toilet paper. You use the toilet paper, you flush it, it eventually decomposes, or if you incinerate it, it goes more quickly into carbon. It decomposes, it releases the carbon back into the atmosphere so that other trees can use the same carbon. Folks, that's called recycling. That's called recycling. It's called the carbon cycle, technically. So growing trees, cutting them down, growing them again does not harm the planet. It's a sustainable cycle of carbon that's used to make paper. And what powers the whole thing is energy from the sun. It's sunlight that's powering the photosynthesis that's allowing the trees to grab the carbon out of the atmosphere and to make molecules such as cellulose. So, what are they going to? They're going to ban toilet paper? Are they just going to ban all paper? Like, oh, how dare you write on paper with a pencil? That's so dangerous to the world. No, you have to use these electronic devices that are made from rare earth metals mined out of dirty, filthy mines using slave labor in China. That's green, they say. That's green. But if you use a pencil and paper, oh, you're evil. You're evil to the whole world. Got news for you. Companies like Georgia Pacific, I think they're one of the big paper producers, and don't they make toilet paper and Kleenex, all that kind of stuff, or facial tissue, whatever. They're just growing trees over and over and over again on the same plots of land, folks. It's kind of like I'm growing basil in my hydroponic, little boxes, the food rising grow boxes, the bins, the suspended net pot, non-circulating hydroponics. I'm growing kale. I'm growing lettuce. What else? I'm growing strawberries. Okay. So if I eat the kale, is that evil? No. I'm eating the kale, and then I'm going to grow more kale in the same spot. It's renewable kale. It's like, but I guess these eco-lunatics, they think that's bad. They're like, how dare you cut the kale? How dare you eat the kale? The kale was good and you can't eat it. I guess they just want everybody to not eat food. There's no crops for you. Just chew on crickets and insects, which is what they're actually saying right now. You should all eat insects and don't have paper. And of course, next it's going to be no cotton for you. Pretty soon, you won't even be allowed to buy a pair of jeans. You're just going to have to basically wear your recycled toilet paper as your outfit. And they'll have like toilet paper Fridays at the office instead of casual Fridays. Everybody just show up. They'll just have like a couple of wraps of toilet paper. Everybody look like, sumo wrestlers, pounding on the ground, wrapped in, reusable toilet paper. And everybody run around the office and talk about how green they are, virtue signaling all day long. And it'll become contraband to have a roll of teepee for your bunghole. I don't know, folks. I don't even know what to say anymore. The world is so crazy, insane. But sometimes I think they're just putting things out there like that just to see how stupid people are to go along with it. Just like a comedian, like throwing out insane, crazy things. Like, what if we just told everybody to eat insects and reuse all their toilet paper and live in cardboard boxes? I'm going to play that video here for you in just a second. But just reminding you of our sponsors. Number one, we have our whey protein back in stock at the Health Ranger store. So if that's something you've been waiting on, check it out, healthrangerstore.com. I use that every day in my smoothies with the avocados, the bananas, the flax seeds, the coconut water, the turmeric, and what else do I put in there? Oh yeah, I put the broccoli sprouts in there as well. And I also blend in the kale that I'm growing that I was just talking about. I pick lettuce and kale and sometimes ripe strawberries and sometimes I have some Swiss chard that I'm growing. I just pick a bunch of that stuff and I just stuff it in the smoothie blender and I just blend it all in there. So I don't have to buy, let's say, like, I don't know, concentrated vegetables, pills or powders. I just grow the vegetables and stuff them in the blender and then just drink them. It's like, how do I get my vegetable servings per day? I drink it, actually, is what I do. It's just, I don't know. I don't like to just chew on a bunch of veggies all day, frankly. I like to have more high density nutrition in a drinkable format. So I become like a salad smoothie guy, actually. I just kind of drink salads in the smoothie, but they taste good because I have bananas in there too. So it doesn't taste yucky or anything like that. To me, it tastes great. Anyway, grow your own veggies and also check out the whey protein at the Health Ranger store. And of course, the Satellite Phone Store is the sponsor, sat123.com. That's the website. And I always travel with the satellite phone. And given what's about to happen, kind of where we're headed this year with all the chaos and, maybe some power outages taking place and telecom situation is kind of dicey. They're going to be turning on 5G in some areas too. That's a whole news story. But it's good to have backup communications device that does not rely on the cell towers. And that's a satellite phone. As long as you can point it at the sky, you can send and receive calls and texts. So check them out at sat123.com. They can't ignore it forever. It's all coming out. Okay. So that's all I'm going to say on that topic. We'll continue with other topics. So I was talking with Ed Group yesterday, and we were having a great conversation about what the world is going through right now. And we both agreed that there's a mass awakening that's taking place, but that the necessary steps to get to this mass awakening are involving, of course, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And, there's this real destruction agenda that the globalists are carrying out: economic destruction, destruction of the family, destruction of public trust in all the institutions, and so on. But that this is ultimately part of the Great Awakening. And then Ed said something that I thought was really profound. He said, our job, you and me, and for those of you listening to this, you're in the same group. Our job is to help others transition into this Great Awakening. So we have to, at some point, hold their hands as they kind of, gently tiptoe into a full red pill situation. Now, some of them will never want to take that journey. Some of them just can't stand to be red pilled, and they're like, no, give me the juicy steak, blue pill me. And they want the comfort zone of their delusional fairy tale world. But that fairy tale is being shattered by the day, and there will come major events here very soon, I would imagine, here in 2022, major events that are going to shatter the fairy tale for a huge number of people, and their illusions will fall away. And when that happens, they're going to be psychologically naked and traumatized, and they're going to need a tremendous amount of help to be able to get through this process and make it to the other side in some kind of, meaningful way, so they can parse the world around them. When that happens, it's people like you and I and people like Ed Group who are the ones that can show them the way, how to step into reality, because we've been living in reality this entire time. We knew they were going to release it on humanity. We know they're going to crash the fiat currency system. We know they're pulling off a global reset. I mean, they tell us what they're doing. It's not a giant mystery to you and me, but to the oblivious masses, they have no idea that any of this is going to happen because, of course, they watch CNN or some other brainwashing network that's telling them there's no such thing as mass formation psychosis, as they're all victims of mass formation psychosis. So I want to invite you to just think about this. I know that all of us, we have conflict with family and friends and coworkers and maybe neighbors and so on, maybe spouses. I know a lot of people have even divorced over what's happening in the world right now. But we have to be willing, I think, as humanitarians, because we are on the side of humanity. We're on the side of truth. We're on the side of God. We're on the side of saving lives and saving humanity. We have to be willing to embrace a transition for people who previously, called us crazy people or morons or what have you. And we need to help those who are transitioning. Now, I'm not talking about transitioning genders here. So I'm not saying to help your friend who's a man join the Penn State swimming championship team for women. No. What I'm saying is transitioning to the real world, which is going to be a psychic shock for those people. And the real world, it's getting red pilled. It's understanding the true history of what's happened. Like when you get red pilled, 9/11 was completely engineered. It was allowed to happen. It was part of the deep state plan under Bush, former CIA family, right? And Oklahoma City, it was carried out by the feds, just on and on, all the way up to January 6th, more recently. JFK was assassinated by the deep state, and so on. And there's lots of different levels of getting red pilled, like, oh, we're not alone in the universe, There's water on Mars. That's what NASA just announced recently. And did you see a couple days ago? China just announced there's water on the moon. And they don't mean liquid water, by the way. They're talking about some number of parts per million of water that's locked into the moon rock, you would say, certain types of rocks. But there is mineable water on the moon. So that's a big big awakening. You mean there's water out there? You mean we could have colonies and actually mine water and live on other planets? You mean Mars has an atmosphere because NASA's flying a helicopter on Mars, as they're bragging about all the time? The helicopter even has a name. It's called Scout, and they're flying that sucker all over Mars. So, of course, Mars has an atmosphere. We've talked about that before. But a lot of people are going to get red-pilled. Wait till they hear about the real history of the rise and fall of multiple human civilizations. Wait till they hear about ancient aliens contacting early human civilizations. Oh, yeah, a lot of people are going to be totally freaked out. Or how about this? Wait till they find out that all this is illusion. You're living in a giant simulation. And that consciousness is a means of faster than light communication. Oh, whoa. It just depends on how far people are going to go as they're being red pilled. And some people will only go part way. Other people will go, a lot further down that rabbit hole. But I believe we're entering, well, let me say it this way. I think we're approaching the end of the era of just delusion and falsehoods and authoritarian control. And I think we're about to enter, through this painful birthing process, we're about to enter a new era of human consciousness, awakening, decentralization, the acknowledgement of the enlightened individual with individual liberties as a divine consciousness, an individual who's creative, an individual who has a soul, whether they were on Epstein Island or not, or hanging out on the Lolita Express jet or whatever. So yeah, there's judgment. But a lot of people are going to fail this. Some of the people who fail this test are still going to heaven, by the way, because they were otherwise good people in their lives, but they were gullible and they took the shot and that destroyed their physical body. But it didn't destroy, let's say, their soul necessarily. And that was even worse. It was like this endless fire, being eaten alive by demons over and over again, but my body kept regenerating because it was eternity, and the pain never stopped. It was like, if you could hear these evil people, the stories from hell or something, that's kind of what it would be like. The rest of us would be looking at that and saying, well, maybe you shouldn't have trafficked children. You could have not carried out evil if that was your choice, but for whatever reason, you chose evil, so there you go. And that's not even the worst part about hell, because part of what happens when you get sent to hell is everybody who goes to hell gets a Tesla vehicle, an electric car, but there are no charging stations in hell. So you can't find any parking, and there's no charging stations, and you're burning up and being eaten alive over and over again. So, but in heaven, there's going to be plenty of parking, because there's not going to be that many people making it there. I'm not sure what kind of vehicle you get when you go to heaven. It's probably an upright bicycle with a comfortable seat. And comfortable seats only exist in heaven, not on earth when it comes to bicycles. The concentration camps, no, they call them internment camps. Yeah, because that sounds better. Well, if you go back to September 20th of last year, we covered this story on Natural News. where in Washington state, the government of Washington had issued job listings for strike team coordinators. So July of last year, Jen Psaki at the White House announced strike teams in a press conference at the White House. Says we're going to have strike teams go into the communities. And then September, they're putting out job listings in Washington state for strike team coordinators. Why? Because they're hiring strike team coordinators. So there's no evidence that they're going to stand up now. They're probably just going to walk right into the death camps and say, yeah, do whatever, you know. Same thing with the people of Portland. You know, the conservatives and gun owners and Christians are pretty much fleeing. And whoever's left behind is just, I don't know, too oblivious to know what's going on. That's our new audio platform. Many hosts, great shows. It's running, you know, Monday through Friday. The lineup is just amazing. The guests, the hosts. I mean, we got Dr. It's pretty amazing. So check out these platforms, spread the word. We're doing our best to try to create platforms where people can speak freely about all of these issues. And thank you for your support. Without your support, obviously, we could not make this happen. So thank you for listening today. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. I'll be back with you in about 24 hours with more updates. God bless you. Thank you for your support and take care.